Hello, it's TD again, just touching base. You might notice I have some new headphones. I got the same Sony ones I was using before, but these are these kind of off-white colored ones. Anyway, I just wanted to touch base right now, but I also just wanted to indicate that excuse me, I'm taking songs from my second album. Well, it's actually my third, but the second one isn't in production anymore. But the third one, called Here Today, and I'm taking the waveform files that were actually on that album, and I'm running it through these mastering programs that I got from Mastering the Mix. And maybe if you guys have some better ideas, you can tell me what they are, because I'm not 100% sure I'm doing this in the exact right order. But I'm just going through kind of what I'm doing on this right now. And what I have is, I'll show you, I'm just trying to arrange this to be seen a little bit better. And then, okay, so what I'm using is, by Mastering the Mix, I'm using which is really cool to be able to resize the windows, by the way, as a secondary subject. But it's this one's called Mixroom for mastering. This one's called Bassroom, which is supposed to be similar to Mixroom, but it only focuses on the bass and divides up the bass a little. And then this one's called Animate, and I've heard a lot of great things about Animate. I do like it. I just have found that for me personally, and again, maybe I'm not using it completely right, and your input is greatly appreciated, but I just find that it's very easy with this Animate to really blow up the sound to where it just, if you turn it too high, it doesn't sound good. But for me, in the very subtle layers, like I've got this expand, hope you can see it, set to only 5%. I've got punch only set to 6%. I got ignite set to 11% and grow to 11. So you can go all the way up there. You know, you can really raise this up to 300%. And maybe in certain circumstances that would be the perfect amount, but I find that it gets very jarring sounding myself when you do that. Now here's the thing, I don't know if we're actually going to hear Ableton, so I'm having a hard time with OBS. I don't seem to be able to get my program audio in there, so I'm sorry. It's just me, and I can hear it, but I don't think you can. But I hope everything is understandable what I'm going through, despite the fact that you can't hear the music. But there's a song here, and these softwares give suggestions of where to put these different EQ bands. These are bands on the EQ, and if I turn it down, a lot of the highs just kind of, I'm sorry, a lot of the bassy sounds just went away. It's kind of mid-rangey, actually. A little bit mid-rangey goes away. So I'm going to put that kind of where they had the signs. Now, if one is behind the other and you can't pick it, you click the middle line, and then you can pick it again, if it's kind of hidden by one or the other. And I'm just trying to line these up to these curves over here to match that more or less, which, frankly, I'm not sure why that isn't automated, at least as a starting point. Maybe it is, maybe there's a way to do it that I don't know, but this is how I do it. So I just do it by hand, which doesn't take very long. And then I go to the top band and try to line it up with the bands on the sides, which is, this is a little strange. It almost seems to go straight up and down here on this graph. The other thing I sometimes do is I go like this, delete all bands, and I say add the smart bands, and I just push 7, and it automatically puts them. Then I go back into Ableton and kind of start the song over again and give it a fresh. There's also this seems to reset it for Bassroom. So you can see all these lines are at the front right now, but they're going to adjust in a minute. They're going to start adjusting. Right now there's no bassy on the song really, it's just an intro. But when the intro starts and the drums start thumping is when it starts to really do its job. Mixroom and Bassroom, and it gives you its concept of where it thinks you should put the bass. And you can see that those just dropped all back. But I prefer to fix this one up a little bit first. And I'm not sure why this isn't activating. It seems like those should be further frontwards and back. And I'll tell you, there's a little bit of strangeness to that, to where actually what I've actually done is very odd sounding. But what I do is I just telling you my process, my workaround, because I'm not seeing the sharp bell curve that I normally do on this. So I'm going to say this song is called Are You Down? So I'm going to say save live set as, and I already have an Are You Down, so I'm going to, maybe I'll put like a B after that. Wasn't, okay, so let's see. Actually, I'm going to reopen the original Are You Down. Remixing that I did. And I'm going to reopen this project. Okay, this is also Are You Down? This is some work I did in the past. So if we go here, you can see, so on the final, on this thing, the group, I have a compressor with just a little bit of compression on it and a limiter. The master has nothing on it, like effects on it. And then this, I have the waveform of the song. And again, I have Mixroom, Bassroom, Animate on that. And let's position those again. So let's see what it does this time. Because it looks like some settings were done a little differently. So let's start it over. I'm not sure if you can even hear that. I think I'll turn the speakers on a little, at least so you hear it. And you can hear the music now. I'm going to turn it down a little. I just want you to hear where it's at. I don't really expect you to get a real clarity out of this. But what I want to show is when it goes into the thumping areas here, you can see this algorithm starts making adjustments. Maybe it thought that that bass thud was just going to come on really, really overpoweringly and just blow the speakers out in a like a DJ setting or something, playing the song. So it tries to, and then this, the mix room, does similar. It gives you the green line there, you can see, is where it thinks that things should be based on this. I set it for electronic trance on this particular album for like an emulation of what it's trying to emulate. And this shows this being higher. It's weird how on this particular song This graph is so gradual. The changes that it's asking for are minuscule. Usually this is a very wavy graph, and there's bigger changes that I make when I do the mastering in this software, but this particular track must have already been mastered pretty well. So right now I'm trying to get rid of the sharp inaccuracies on the curves based on where it thinks things should be. So I can move this around and kind of get the sample curve to line up. And then the bass here looks like it looks like in the mix maybe the original had very, very strong bass, because this is asking me to take the bass all the way back to low levels. And usually those basses can be more forward in the mix, but it must have already been very bassy, and Bassroom is asking me to really back off on the bass. Maybe that was making it sounding really thunderous and kind of muddy, and it wants, Bassroom probably wants it to sound a little more natural and a little more relaxed on the thudding, and more of just a kick but not the thud. And right now you're gonna see it wants more bass on the sample, because we're not really in a heavy kick area on the song, but when the heavy kick area on the song comes, those drift back. So when they drift back, I don't pull them forward again on other areas, because those areas can thud when it gets to the really kick-filled parts coming up. But some of those are coming up here at this end part, and we can also skip back a little and just double check the curves against that. But I think we're pretty close to like this new mastering I've been doing. And I wish the example was a little bit more extreme, that you could see how you can alter these curves and alter the sound, but it seems like this song was already pretty well mastered, so it's not making as vast of a change recommendation that I think maybe it usually does. So I'm just trying to match this up with their little side example, and it's pretty close. But we're in the bass area. It did ask me to bring those forward. I'm gonna go into this area here where there's a lot of thudding and see if it asks me. It doesn't really ask me to bring it back, so maybe I'll bring some more of that kicking back in. Maybe it's almost like this app is a little fickle. At first it tells me to bring it back, and then it says don't. And it's like, was it wrong the first time and now it's right, or was it right before and now I'm making it wrong? I'm also quite surprised again by how subtle the changes being requested on these curves are, because usually there's a big S curve with some waivers in it even sometimes that they want you to try to match. But this time it's very subtle, the changes being requested. And it did ask me to bring some of these back, so generally when it wants it to bring it back on the Bassroom, I do it because I don't want the bass to be overpowering. I also don't want the bass to get lost, obviously. But this is telling me to back off on some of that bass. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. Hopefully it's going to still boom enough. I think it will. I still hear the bass thump in. Okay. So now I think it's ready to render, and so let's see, 158, and I'm just gonna say file export, and I'm gonna set that to 158, and I'm gonna say, do I want to normalize it? I don't think it needs normalization. Do I want to dither it? I'm not going to dither it because it's already been dithered before. This is a remaster, so I'm going to leave that off. And I'm going to say export. And we already had an Are You Down remix export. So I hope the one I'm doing now is a better one. I'm going to name this B just in case. And now it's exporting the song. And while that's happening, you may be wondering what's going on over here. This is literally hundreds of thousands of frames on a After Effects render that I'm doing for another song called, right now it's called 7 Chakras. And it's a 140-minute long song. So I rendered hundreds of thousands of frames of animation in 4K at 60 frames a second. And this render's been running for over a month. And now I'm just copying frames over. And I'm copying them onto a faster drive because it wouldn't do my output as an MP4 from the drive it was on, and it kept losing frames. So I'm hoping this faster drive that won't happen. But I'm also a little concerned that I'm doing all this extra work and it still doesn't work. And then I'm not sure exactly what I'll do. But right now I'm just trying. I got a super fast drive. It's like 2,000 millibytes a second. Whereas this one, the other one that it's on was considered like 500. But the weird thing is, I don't know if you could, this is Windows or what, but why is it copying at 2 millibytes a second and 3 millibytes a second? Is it because that drive that I'm copying off of is damaged or something's wrong with it? I'm just wondering if anybody knows why would that not be much faster. Anyway, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take this song and I'm gonna say delete. Then I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna grab another song called Smoke-Filled Room. And I'm going to replace the song on the timeline with Smoke-Filled Room. If Ableton didn't just crash. I noticed it didn't like me dragging that over from OneDrive account. I think it's still coming. It just wasn't happy. There it is. So I'm going to double click this song. It's a new song, and I'm going to push the warp button so it unwarps it, I guess. It's weird how that end part wasn't selected. So I'm going to put this here from the starting point, and I'm going to take the loop and bring it right to the end. Now this is a new song, so it's going to have a new settings. So I'm going to push this Animate. I've been leaving alone for the most part, but this I'm going to kind of reset. And this I'm going to say delete all bands, and then I'm going to add the bands. I just do 7 for now. And then I'm going to play this. This is a different type of song. It's less thudding, but there is still a lot of bass in it. So I'm going to wonder what this comes up with. You can see that this top band, it wants to go back a little. So I'm going to do that. Take this green one, looks like it wants to come forward a little. This orange one looks like it wants to come forward a little. According to the graph they've set out on their recommendations there against the wall, you can see I'm trying to align mine to theirs. Which again, I'm not exactly sure why this just isn't automated unless they want to have you line this stuff up and pretend you participated. But all I'm trying to do is line it up with their graph, so why not just push a button and it lines it up perfectly? But I guess it's just a guide and they want you to listen and make further changes, and I'll probably do that in the future. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just trying to line it up to what their recommendations are for now. So I line it up to where it says, and it shows these little lines against the wall. and I line it up to those. Because if I go here, it's going to be very bassy, and it's going to not sound like the settings I had for... see, I set it to electronic trance. And I wanted it to have that type of sound to it. And so I don't want to have that be super bassy. And it's interesting how these lines move. Like now it wants more. It's like, it seems like it suddenly demanded more treble out of this and less of some of these other sounds. And again, these are pretty straight curves, so this might have already had semi-decent mastering on it. But I'm just trying to give it a little extra with this tool and see how that sounds. So far, I have done a few of these remasters, and I was surprised by it. It sounded pretty good and pretty loud. Like, sometimes my previous work without this level of mastering on it sounded okay, but it just sounded kind of muddy and it wasn't loud in the car or on the headphones. And when I use this technique of these, the Mixroom and the Bassroom, it does seem, so far at least, to give it a professional, like radio ready type sound, which I'm really happy with so far. I was interested because some people were so excited by the Animate, and they were saying that they used only that sometimes for mastering. So maybe if I tried using only that, but it doesn't have really the equivalent of an EQ in it, I don't think. So I like these tools. Actually, I prefer them, at least so far, better. Is the Mixroom and the Bassroom. And then this one here, when I raised it up, just seemed really over the top on the changes it was making to the song, and it didn't sound like it was for the better. So I kind of backed off on using the Animate tool, except just like a little bit, and just to give it a little punch. But it seems like the punch that you give it, even a subtle amount, like if you go too far beyond that, it from my experience, it's making it sound kind of distorted almost. So I just use Animate on a smaller level, and I use Mixroom and Bassroom on a larger level. And I'm trying to line these up, and it does sort of change as you work. It's like, you know, you're fighting a moving target. But for the most part, I'm hoping it should be pretty decent. So what I want to do now is what I do is I render these out, and then I give it a listen on my headphones later. But I just wanted to kind of take you through this little process of something I'm doing right now, which is, you know, generating, you know, these new remastered versions of these songs. And they were already mastered, but they were mastered with like an online mastering tool. And honestly, I don't think it did the greatest job, to be honest. I mean, I think my hand done touch here is helping, to be honest, is what I think. So I'm going to say, this is called Smoke Filled Room, so say save live as, and I'm going to say Smoke Filled Room. So I like to name the file after, name the project after the file. Okay, and then I can also export it, and it will give it the same name, which I like. So I'm going to say 112 frames. I don't think it needs normalization on this song myself. I'm going to say boom and let it render. So I just wanted to take you through this process, and there's one more. It's called Space Flight. Maybe we'll do that one next. It's going to be a little different, and maybe that's a good thing, that the graphs I have a feeling the graphs on Spaceflight will be more drastic requests for change on it. And, you know, it's just rendering that out, and I can listen to those later on the headphones. But I hope you're enjoying this. I'm just kind of upset that I can't figure out how to get the audio out of Ableton into OBS to record it. I've done it before, but everything I add, I tried to add an output capture, input capture, audio, and I didn't see where you can add an actual program in it. It's a little strange on this OBS. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is delete this song. And I'm going to grab another song. And let's go with, that was song 14 on the album. Now we'll get the 15th song. And that's called Space Flight. So it has to download it from OneDrive. And another thing sometimes I do is I reopen the mastering project and run Mixroom and Bassroom again, and because it's audio, it's fickle, and it seems to change upon reopening the scene. It will keep your present settings, but then when you push play, it will read it differently and ask for you to make changes. So I'm wondering, why does that happen? Okay, so here's Space Flight. I'm going to turn off warp. I'm going to take the file, drag it to the front. I'm going to zoom out and make sure nothing got cut off the end, because that's actually happened a few times. Okay, so this is going to have a different settings, I'm pretty sure. It's a different type of song. Let's put on this heavy part. So Mixroom and stuff is making different recommendations for this. And actually what I'm going to do is this. It's strange, but I'm going to do this. It's called Space Flight. I'm going to name this file Space Flight. And I'm actually going to reopen it. Reopen the scene. And then what I want it to do is sort of start the plugins fresh, because I did do dragging and stuff in. So let's see if it, you can see it readjusting everything, which is interesting that it didn't do that without me restarting this. So it seemed to want more of this yellow bass forward, and this bass is coming on after this algorithm, so this one here I want to get right first. And you can see this is a more drastic curve than the previous. And I try to match that. And you can pull these thinner. And I try to line up those curves back in there, you can see. And this makes it a little tighter on the curve. I mean, it's just something I've been trying to match. So let's. It's a little tricky because this one has kind of like a drastic curve on it that I'm trying to match. Not sure what that's about exactly, but let me just try to get this close first. So it's good that it sounds like the software recommended less mid-rangey sounds, which I'm actually happy about, because it's my personal feelings that mid-rangey sounds that are too loud can often be very harmful and kind of shrill sounding to my ears personally. And this can happen also with the super high trebly sounds. But I tend to find, you want to drag this loop to the end. Okay, and then we'll try to line these up. I'm getting there, as you can see. It's getting a little closer. I just hope I have enough bands, because this one kind of has a strange curvature on the bands, but I think I'm getting there. And that's pretty close to what their recommendation was. And then let me check it against the bass. This one is asking I back off a little bit. So usually, rather than going forward, I tend to back off on bass. Here I'm moving it forward a little, but I tend not to bring it forward, because I don't want it to be overpoweringly bassy in the mix. I want it to be bassy, and I want it to be thunderous where it needs to, but I don't want it to be thunderous where it shouldn't be. And it's like just creating all this thud. And it wants me, the Bassroom wants me to take the bass back in some of those higher bassy areas, because it's gonna like sound bad on a and like one time I played some of my music in a live event, and there was some parts where the bass stood out on those songs, and the guy that ran the booth was like, "Can you master this stuff a little better, because you have such fluctuations in treble and bass that if you're not careful, you can blow the speakers even in a high quality surrounding like I was playing." So I try to make it a little bit more even keeled, so you don't suddenly just get hit with this wall of ear-killing bass or treble or mid-range. But I think we're getting pretty close to where the software wants it to be. And again, it might be interesting to do a comparison of like all the songs together after. Like, how did that improve? I think what it's doing is it's kind of giving it like a pro sound that sounds pretty decent overall. And it'll probably sound good on an output. So I'm just going to set this to like right here, and I'm going to say, okay, what frame is that? It's what, frame 156. So I'm going to say File, Export Audio Visual 156. And I think I do want normalization on this song, because the sound maybe sounds a little bit too loud and then quiet. Oops, I forgot to name it. So, okay, no, this is Space Flight, so we're good. So I'm going to say Space Flight, save, and there it goes. So I hope you enjoyed this. There's a couple other songs I could bring up and go through this process on. This video is getting longer. I wonder if you guys are getting tired of it. Thank you for tuning in on the use of these mastering plugins. And don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button for the bell, and share it with your friends, and leave some comments and thumbs up, please. It's TD in VFX Rec Studio in Oceanside, California. Thank you again.